there's been less attention, and this is where I'm really interested, and I suppose where my work centres. There's been less attention paid to the philosophical violence of colonisation, insofar as Māori thought, Māori language, and Māori ideas about everything were taken as being vastly inferior to those of English or European derivation. Now, this causes problems, and again, this is something that I've only recently been thinking about, and it doesn't seem to me to be widely acknowledged or known. But one of the ways in which that was done was that because Western knowledge and culture and so forth and people and everything was held to be so vastly superior to those of Māori, the assumption inherently was made that there could exist no Māori concepts that did not also exist in the English Western cultural language. So what this has meant is over the years, over the generations, is that Māori philosophies have been completely taken up, appropriated and distorted and brought into the public record. And I mean, it is the case. I see not only science knowledge, Western culture, and even the English language all have this quality of being able to take resources from other cultural groups and kind of use what they want or what makes sense within, reframe, right? And use, like for science, it's often said, you know, we often hear it said that Indigenous knowledge has a lot to offer science, right? You guys have heard that? Are you familiar with that kind of idea?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. But the trouble with that is that there's a fine line. Well, I think when people say that, many times, often they're thinking about how, for example, Māori knowledge of particular native plant species, you know, herbal medicine properties, and those have been picked up and have been commercialized and so on and so forth. So is that what we mean when we say that Indigenous knowledge has a lot to offer science? Because that's really a kind of a colonization, isn't it? I think the other way that that kind of idea is promulgated is what I sort of referred to before, as this idea that there is a wisdom within Indigenous knowledge that has been lost from science or Western knowledges. But with that kind of 200 years of hierarchical kind of denigration and really almost destruction of any possibility that Māori could have cognitive resources that are not available in the European or English equivalents, it becomes quite hard to find that. And the other thing that happens, of course, is that we see over and over again. I mean, I read about these Mauna Kea, right? In the country that you're based in, has such significance to the natives, but is seen simply as convenient site to, you know, from which to conduct astronomy. I mean, I don't know the details, so I probably shouldn't even mention it. You know, that goes back to what I sort of referred to before. Although I'm Indigenous, I can really only speak from my own identity as Māori, right? But I mean, very similar things happen here. Sacred sites, etc., you know, put under threat. Even going to court, because our society, New Zealand society, seems to have a real tendency to want to be seen to be giving due consideration to Māori causes. But when you put really Indigenous knowledge up against science, that's where you get the kind of dissonance. And in the, I mean, I'm referring to a court case over a motorway, a new motorway being built, where the local people, their concern was that it was disturbing the place of residence of their spiritual guardian, which we would call a taniwha. You put that kind of knowledge claim in the court system and it will always be trumped by Western scientific, rational, and all the rest of it, modernist frameworks. So it becomes very difficult, you know, and so that claim sits there. Indigenous knowledge has so much to offer science, but I never see it kind of go beyond that. And indeed, I mean, in more recent work that I've published in not in EPAT, but in the Journal of the Royal Society of New Zealand, which is our top sort of science, you know, that's our top science journal in this country. And there is beginning to be the same debate about science and Indigenous knowledge, or particularly in this case, Māori knowledge, in the pages of that journal. And I was motivated or inspired to respond to a short article that had been written some years ago by a Māori scientist who laid down an argument for thinking or for arguing that Māori knowledge is science. And so he used various arguments to make this case. But to me, that misses the point that the value of Indigenous knowledge, not just for science, but also for Indigenous people, its value is actually in its difference. The fact that it's different is what Māori knowledge sort of, and Māori philosophy underpins Māori identity. So I see Māori philosophy or Māori philosophical ideas as an important plank of my identity as Māori.